this, and we're going to go pretty quickly since it's just you and me. You can ask some questions if you have any. Otherwise, I had a few group activities, so we will skip those possibly. We might be joined by a few people, so we'll see. So welcome to our first 6th grade virtual session. We are going to be talking about Module 4, the weather. And we're also going to really quickly review course expectations, Canvas, some general stuff like that. So we will start. If this will present, let's go. Okay. So we will start with our course expectations. So you need to attend at least one middle school lab in person. That's more like a hopeful expectation. If you can't attend labs in person, please let me know. You must turn in 2 labs from the middle school lab, not in person. You must turn them in by the end of the semester. And I'm going to show you where that's located and how you can see any past labs. You must attend all virtual sessions. And if you can't, let me know why you can't attend them. Read the lessons. Whoops. I've noticed a few people skipping the lesson and going straight to the assignment, which then they get a lot of stuff wrong that they would have gotten correct if they would have looked at the lesson. Make sure you're taking notes, right? You can use your notes on tests. You can use your notes on discussion-based assessments. You can use your notes on the final exam, right? On any tests that you have, you can use them. So make sure you have notes. Our next virtual session is actually going to be a note-taking lesson where we go through one assignment together and take notes. What is this? Come on. Why won't it show up? Oh, come on, chat box. There we go. Okay. Yes. Okay. So ask me questions if you get stuck on something, because I don't always know when you need help. And now we're going to take a little quick review of Canvas. So what do we find in Canvas for our course? We have this calendar, right, where we see events coming up. If we go to March, we will see that we have our second middle school lab from 9:30 to 11:30. That will be for all grades, so 6th grade is included in that. It's going to be about bubbles. Right? I know that sounds kind of weird, but we're going to use bubbles. I was just going to see if somebody was emailing about this. And then we also have our next 6th grade virtual session is going to be not until April. So we're going to have quite a bit of time before we get to that next one. You will also notice in modules that I added to the very bottom of modules, I added a module called Labs and Virtual Sessions. So this virtual session is going to be posted here when it's done. And there's also the first lab we did, the DNA extraction lab. So you have to turn in 2 labs that happen during the middle school lab time. There's going to be 4 total. So you can attend all 4 and then just turn in 2 of them. You can attend 2 and just turn in 2 of them. The last resort, if you miss them, is that you can watch them here and still be able to turn them in. So there's absolutely no reason to not be able to turn those labs in. And otherwise, the grade breakdown for the class, tests, exams, and projects are going to be 50% of the grade. Assignments and labs are 40%, and oral exams are 10. So those oral exams are going to be important here, that you're emailing me and checking in and making sure that you're ready to go. So Module 4, weather, right? Are you there, Jaden, right now, or did you walk away for a second? Okay. I'm guessing that Jaden walked away. So I was going to ask everyone generally what weather is so that we can kind of write out our own little description here. I'm going to get my annotate ready. For some reason, this thing is a little glitchy today. All right, so what is weather, right? Hopefully you're thinking something like temperature, the daily occurrence in an area, right? We really want to think of weather as the daily, ooh, this color is not going to show up. It's yellow. Daily conditions at a location, right? We're talking about temperature, humidity, rainfall, etc. Right? This is going to be very different than climate, right? Which is kind of telling us the average or overall conditions. So keep that in mind as you're going through this. Weather is something that's constantly changing and is location based. Okay, so there's a bunch of lessons here about weather. One of the main things that we want to keep in mind here is layers of the atmosphere. Right, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of the atmosphere here. They all end in the word sphere, right, which means circle because they're encompassing the earth. They're going around the earth. So the troposphere, that's where the weather is occurring, right? That's where also most planes are flying, right, when they're taking off. Some planes get up into the stratosphere. But weather is occurring in the troposphere. The stratosphere contains our ozone layer, which is another layer of protection around our Earth. And then we have our mesosphere, which is where weather balloons actually go, right? That's so that they can see down into the troposphere. They can collect data about what's going on below. In the thermosphere is where we have satellites, right? We have meteors, other flying space objects. And then the exosphere is basically just space at that point. So I found this video that this meteorologist recorded, right? A meteorologist is a scientist who studies weather. And he made this for someone's class, I guess his cousin's class or someone that he knew. And he does a really good job explaining how we read all these symbols and how we can actually tell what weather is going to happen. So we're going to watch this video and then we're going to practice identifying weather.
Good morning, everybody. I'm meteorologist Ryan Davidson. I'm actually Elizabeth's mom's cousin.
Okay, see, so somebody named Elizabeth's mom, this is her cousin, and he was nice enough to record this video for her class. Pretty cool.
And I work here at the Weather Channel, and I hear you guys are learning about weather. So we're going to talk a couple of things about weather systems and fronts and kind of how those all come together to make weather, and then we'll talk a little bit about your forecast. So first off, we're going to talk about understanding what goes on in a weather map. So first, we've got cold air, and as it pushes further to the south, along the leading edge of where that cold air is advancing is where we would set up a cold front. And that's going to be this blue line here with all these triangles, and they point in the direction the cold front is moving. Now, on the other side, we have a warm front. When you have a mass of warm air moving northward, or in any direction, the leading edge of that warm air mass is where we draw this warm front, which is going to be the little red line with the half circles. The best way to remember it is they're like little half suns, so they're always denoting warmer air. You kind of work it out that way, where sun, warmth, warm front, right, like that. So that's how we denote where a warm front lays. Now, when we start moving and adding in things like pressure systems, we have a low pressure system right here. Air around a low pressure system moves counterclockwise and inward. So when we start putting those air masses around that area of low pressure, we begin to see just a few things happening here. The warm air surging northward, that's where the warm front is. The cold front surging southward, that's where we line up that cold front. And then when we zoom in closer, where we get all the precipitation, what's going to happen here is you've got this air coming down from the north, and this air kind of going towards the north and east. What happens is this piles up as it gets close to this warm air mass and it starts to lift. So where these meet, all that wind meets, we call that convergence, the meeting of air. When it happens, it starts to go, it has nowhere to go, so it has to go up. Once that starts going up, that's where we start to get clouds and rain. And usually along the cold frontal side of a storm is where we'll see things like thunderstorms. But on the warm frontal side, over to the north, that's where we'll start to see just broad areas of rain and showers and cloudiness. And as that comes through, well, the weather gets a little bit cooler. Now, high pressure, a little bit different. High pressure systems, air goes clockwise and outwards from an area of high pressure. So why don't we ever see any rain or anything near an area of high pressure? When you have all of this air moving outwards, it's actually like if you were going to turn the hose right on the ground. What happens is that water goes down and it spreads out. You don't have any lift, so you don't have anything to create that upflow of moisture to create any precipitation. So usually when we talk about high pressure, we talk about nice weather. But let's take a look at what your forecast is looking like as we go through the next couple of days.
Okay.
We're going
so
to be
he
looking
lives
at a little bit of rain.
in, I think, like somewhere in the southeast here, because that's where he's showing what's going on. We're going to go back and watch that again, just because the way he explains this low and high pressure and what's going on with these systems, right? That's what we want to hear about again. Because it's super important, right? Low pressured systems pull air in, right? And those are going to cause storms.
Counterclockwise and inward. So when we start putting those air masses around that area of low pressure, we begin to see just a few things happening here. The warm air surging northward, that's where the warm front is. The cold front surging southward, that's where we line up that cold front. And then when we zoom in closer, where we get all the precipitation, what's going to happen here is you've got this air coming down from the north and this air kind of going towards the north and east. What happens is this piles up as it gets close to this warm air mass and it starts to lift. So where these meet, all that wind meets, we call that convergence, the meeting of air. And when it happens, it starts to go, it has nowhere to go, so it has to go up. And once that starts going up, that's where we start to get clouds and rain. And usually along the cold frontal side of a storm is where we'll see things like thunderstorms. But on the warm frontal side, over to the north, that's where we'll start to see just broad areas of rain and showers and cloudiness. And as that comes through, well, the weather gets a little bit cooler. Now, high pressure, a little bit different. High pressure systems, air goes clockwise and outwards from an area of high pressure. So why don't we ever see any rain or anything near an area of high pressure? When you have all of this air moving outwards, it's actually like if you were going to turn the hose right on the ground. What happens is that water goes down and it spreads out. You don't have any lift, so you don't have anything to create that upflow of moisture to create any precipitation. So usually when we talk about high pressure, we talk about nice weather. But let's take a look at what your forecast is looking like as we go through the next couple.
Okay, so now he's going to talk about a specific example of how to do this, right? Keeping in mind that there's a lot more to predicting weather than just this that we're seeing, but these are the basics, right? They also have tons of other information that they use when they make a forecast prediction. And we know from our personal experience that they're not always right. Sometimes they say it's going to be sunny and you go outside and then it's raining, right? Or the opposite. Sometimes it's raining and you thought it was going to be sunny, right? So they can be wrong because weather is pretty hard to predict.
Couple of days. We're going to be looking at a little bit of rain. We've got a couple of fronts to the south. Here's our warm front. See the red with the half circles. That's going to come northward. And we're going to see a little bit of rain in eastern and central North Carolina as these low pressure systems and their cold fronts and warm fronts move along the eastern seaboard. Then by Wednesday, we'll see maybe a little bit of rain in Raleigh, but it quickly moves out and we start to see some high pressure move in. How do we know? Well, we don't see any weather going on here by Thursday. And that'll stay the same even as we head into Friday. Things kind of clear out, but the next weather system comes on in and we start to see some rain heading in portions of western Tennessee and portions of Mississippi. So here's what comes up for Raleigh over the next 5 days. We've got rain.
So he's in Raleigh. I didn't watch to the very end of this because I knew he was going to do a prediction for somewhere that we weren't, right? But that's basically what these meteorologists do is they look at all this data. They look at low pressures, high pressures, fronts, right? They look at temperature. They look at movement based on the jet stream and other things that are happening in the atmosphere. And that gives them some good idea of what's actually going on, right? So it's pretty cool to hear that from a person who does that as their job. So let's just do one of these together, since we have me and Jaden here, the only person who showed up here to the virtual session today. I might have to give you some bonus points. Why don't we, looking at this picture, right, this map that we see here, we're going to take a minute to think about, first of all, let's try to predict the weather for us, right, in Portland, which should be right around here. In fact, we can draw a little dot where we are. Okay, there's us, right? And then let's also try to predict the weather for a place in Texas. This is pretty close to where Dallas is located. All right, so these two red dots, I didn't make this one very big. Okay, so predicting the weather, current conditions here and current conditions here. So just thinking about this for about a minute. Oops, forgot I was drawing circles and not using the mouse. Okay, so what I would predict here, right? Again, I'm not a meteorologist and we're missing some information. For example, this low with this warm front here, right? It looks like this is not a completely developed warm front to me. So I would say, based on what's going on right around us, we would have had clear weather from this map, right? There's no fronts near us. The low pressure is way down here, right? If this does become a front and starts moving, then maybe we would get rain. But otherwise, it looks like pretty clear. Dallas, on the other hand, I see this cold front moving down, right? Remember, the arrows or the triangles point the direction that the front's moving. It's also near this low pressure. So I would predict that there would be thunderstorms in Dallas because that cold air is moving in. It's mixing with warmer air that's already there. And this low is pulling in that air, right? It's causing there to be thunderstorms and rain there. All right, so it's a science, but it's not an exact science here. We were going to do one more example, but we'll skip through it for now. I will show you the map. This is a crazy map. If you're watching later and you want to try to predict again, right? Why don't you try to predict the weather here and up here in Canada? So pause the video for a second, think about what the weather would be, have a solid argument. You can email me and ask me what the answer would be for that. All right, otherwise, the last thing is, this is your task for the weekend or the next 3 days if you're watching this on a different day. I want you to, for 3 days, keep a detailed log of the weather. Definitely include temperature, precipitation, which means rain or snow, and then the types of clouds that you see. If it's actively raining and you can't really see the clouds, you might not be able to tell. But when it's clear out, like it is right now, you can actually identify which type of clouds you're seeing, right? Even when it's raining, you might be able to figure it out. So I challenge you to try that. And then for extra credit, you can draw a map, a weather map, like we just looked at, that would show us what kind of fronts and highs and lows we would see so that we would get the weather that we're having right now. So this is gonna get posted onto Canvas in about 5 minutes here. So you can view it there. Otherwise, this virtual session is gonna be over here. It was a pretty short one. Thank you for attending, and I will see you next month.